who are not comfortable with the lack of evidence and efficacy in any of the drugs they are offering, then you should also have that choice too. Through here, when the Education Department announced that they required their staff to upload their vaccination status, we're concerned about releasing their private and sensitive health information in their workplace. Sensitive information that we were not required to share as a condition of our employment when we first started, at all. Through here also rang the union, the Australian Education Union, for support. And who got no support? So this is the response that we got from the Australian Education Union. Have a look at this website, as it's quite easy to read and it gives a good summary. The Privacy Act 1998, Commonwealth, does not apply to SA government, as it's a federal and applies to federal government, I think. To national systems employers, everyone who is not state government. So what she's trying to suggest here is because we work for the state government, we're not covered by federal laws. The only thing we have is the Premier Cabinet Circular Information Privacy Principles Instruction, which is not law and therefore unenforceable. Anyone who believes that their privacy has been breached by the government according to the IPP can lodge a complaint. It goes on. Basically, what the union did was show that the union are incompetent of understanding its members and their needs. Furthermore, that the response is not of a union taking out your hard-earned money and funding lawyers who specialise in common law to help its members. Instead, we've got a half-baked response that referred us to the Legal Services Commission of South Australia, which she interpreted poorly. So I urge you, if you're still a member, to revoke your membership. Withdraw your hard-earned money and let them feel the pinch of having their jobs on the line. Instead, perhaps take that money and join or start a class action against the state government and the Education Department. Your money is better spent there. Now, the Privacy Act is a federal law, and I'm going to talk briefly about this. It's outside of my wheelhouse, but unfortunately I've had to step up here and try and find this information to protect our jobs. And up until recently, the Privacy Act did protect our rights, because only healthcare providers were allowed to collect private and sensitive information. Last time I checked, these guys weren't healthcare providers. Unfortunately, recent changes have shown that the state and federal governments can now collect your private and sensitive information. But if we look at 16A of the Privacy Act, permitted general situations in relation to the collection, use or disclosure of personal information, the entity has to reasonably believe that the collection, use or disclosure is necessary to lessen or prevent a serious threat to life, health or safety of an individual or to public health and safety. Fair Work Australia also confirms that the collection of your private and sensitive information is legal if the collection is necessary to lessen or prevent serious threats to life. Let's investigate that for a moment though. Here in South Australia, from SA Gov this morning, we have one active case. And it was from overseas, in a mini hotel. So based on what I just read out, is anyone's health safety at risk? The question we need to ask Stephen Marshall, our Premier, Stephen Wade, our Health Minister, John Gardner, our Education Minister, and Rick Percy, the Chief Executive, is they need to prove that the public health is at risk, which currently it's not. We need to put the onus back on them and prove and they have to prove to us that the public's at risk before they can enforce this upon us. Now here is, of course, where they'll claim, well, they're looking out for public health because their borders are about to open. So let's examine the data from health.gov.au to see what the risks are. Now I want to preface this by saying I'm reluctant to weaponise data, as the government and mainstream media have done this the whole time through. But statistical analysis is important to understand all the information. As of today, over 25 million Australians, we've only recorded 194,119 cases. The vast majority of those people are aged between birth and 59 years of age. In Australia, we've recorded 1,922 deaths from over 25 million people. Out of those deaths, 1,541 of those deaths occurred to people over the age of 70. The next group of 60 to 69-year-olds equate for another 202 deaths across Australia, which leaves a total of only And this is current information from health.gov this morning, which leaves a total of only 179 Australians under the age of 60 that have been recorded as dying with SARS-CoV-2. Think of our workforce. How many teachers and SSO that the government claim they're protecting are over the age of 60?
Yeah.
Now here's where people will interject and perhaps say that, you know, we've been really good at vaccinating and the numbers are low because of lockdowns and forced mandates, etc. But I've been tracking this for over 12 months using information from health.gov, and the uptake of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the death rate have remained statistically constant. I would argue that the rollout has made little difference to people under the age of 60, that they were never at risk of dying then, and this still remains the case now. So what about the deaths that have been recorded? Well, health.gov.au clearly states that if you're under the age of 60, the chances of dying from COVID in Australia out of 25.8 million people is 0.00069%. If you catch the disease, you have a statistical chance of 0.09%, so less than 0.1% chance of dying if you catch it if you're under 60 years of age. So who's dying? Well, the average age of someone dying in Australia from COVID, as of this morning, is 83 years of age.
Yeah.
Right? The average life expectancy in Australia is 83 years of age.
That's right.
83, yeah. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, our government agency responsible for collecting the data, also clearly states that 73.4% of the deaths recorded of people dying with COVID presented at least with one comorbidity. So out of the 1,922 deaths, 1,410 of those people were already seriously ill before contracting the virus. The remainder of the affected people who died exclusively of COVID is down to 512 deaths over the last 2 years. Now I can tell you heart disease in Australia claims 10,000 lives per year and has done for the last 10 years. Cancer kills more people. Even the seasonal flu has killed more people than COVID. I repeat, all of this information is available to check on health.gov.au. Please don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Conversely, the experimental trial vaccine and mRNA gene therapy has recorded with the Therapeutic Goods Association over 75,000 adverse effects and 650 deaths. Now I could argue here that the cure is actually worse than the disease. And with that kind of risk, we need to understand that you can still contract, carry and transmit the disease as well as still end up hospitalised. It's very clear there's risk involved in taking this vaccine. Risk the Education Department has not considered when enforcing this mandate. What I'm saying is this has been seriously overplayed. The media and the government have weaponised COVID case numbers in a campaign of fear to scare you into taking their drugs. They are leveraging our freedoms and now our ability to work and pay our bills. If you are under the age of 70, lead a healthy lifestyle, the data simply does not support the need for any vaccine, especially untested trial vaccine that have not proven their safety and efficacy. SARS-CoV-2 does have a high R0 value, or spread rate. It has an R0 value of 8, which means if you come into contact with 8 people, they could contract the disease. And no, not the ridiculous spread rate I read this morning in an article which was claiming 200. However, taking the trial drugs does have some impact. Professor Nikolai Petrovsky, the director of endocrinology at Flinders, has said in a recent interview that the current batch of AZ, Moderna and Pfizer do reduce the R0 value, but from 8 down to 5 or 6 at best. Meaning that instead of infecting 8 people, now you might only infect 5 or 6. That's still a high spread rate. However, when those drugs also induce thrombosis, blood clots, myocarditis, pericarditis, stroke and death, as well as minor side effects such as nausea, vomiting, constant headaches, and the latest research shows having an impact on the body's immune response, then we need choice. So with all this information at hand, ask yourself if the state government and the Education Department have the right to demand your private and sensitive health information.
They don't!
We need to be smart here though. We need to carefully consider their demands. So in order to do this, and work within Fair Work Australia's guidelines, ask your leader to put in writing sufficient evidence that the mandate is necessary. given we in South Australia have one COVID case and all the information has just been presented. This should include a risk assessment at least, and maybe an MSDS carried out. They need to prove that being jabbed with any of the trial drugs and their inherent risks makes your workplace safer. Remember that current medical research shows that only the elderly, infirmed, morbidly obese, people suffering diabetes, or people who are severely immunocompromised are at risk of dying. And ask, how does having any of the trial drugs keep any of the aforementioned groups safe from COVID? Which we know they don't, because even if you've been jabbed, you can still contract, carry it, and transmit the disease. At the same time, they also have to consider the health and welfare of the people aged 0 to 60 who are healthy, and prove as part of this dialogue that your health and safety is not at risk from the many adverse reactions from taking experimental trial drugs. If they cannot prove this, then we are protected by the Commonwealth Privacy Act. Now, they might try and refer you to the State Act here of privacy, but the Constitution, section 109, clearly states that if the state laws and federal laws are in conflict, then the federal law takes precedence. As part of the conversation, ask them to explain why Pfizer, Moderna and AZ did not underwrite any of their products and won't guarantee your safety.
Yeah.
Ask them why the New South Wales government is currently legislating the same thing, to put the onus on the employers to take responsibility for the drug that they've forced upon their populations. They're shifting the requirements, and that's why you have to sign a waiver when you get it as well. Children are also showing good immunity, and until recently have recorded 0 deaths. Now, there's been one reported recently of an 18-year-old. I haven't had time to investigate that, but it's there. Now we've had, and this group of people have had no access to the vaccines, 0 access. They weren't allowed to get it until recently, and they're still showing that they are building healthy immunity to it. Additionally, the Biosecurity Act 2015 does offer us some questions, protection outside of the healthcare setting. Only a biosecurity officer is allowed to ask you about your health, and only if you present with symptoms of the current biosecurity threat. So your employers can't even ask you about it. They're being unlawful by asking. Not even police officers are allowed to discuss this sensitive information with you unless they have been granted temporary power by a biosecurity officer, which lasts for 14 days, and they have to show you this power in writing. I have a friend who's a biosecurity officer. She has confirmed this. Finally, I urge everyone here strongly not to take any of the unpaid leave they're suggesting. Don't do it. Turn up to work. Refuse to leave. Stand your ground. Either they fire you in writing, unlawfully, or they let you get on with your job. If they have not provided you with the information you've requested about your safety and the safety of others, and they fire you, you at least have grounds to start looking at unfair dismissal. Stand strong, stand together.